according to early reports, the Sims 4 Life and Death expansion pack was already on track to sell better than the previous expansion Sims 4 Lovestruck. And while we don't have all the exact numbers, I do have an idea of why this pack seems to be succeeding. Now, this will be a casual podcast style kind of video where I will be giving a few of my thoughts. It's not meant to be a full review of the pack. However, I do think it's important to go over some key details about this pack and why it could be resonating more with Sims players. Now, first of all, the Life and Death expansion pack is actually the first expansion pack since I think Get Famous that we have an active career. I don't tend to be someone who gravitates towards active careers as much, but I think having the option is definitely a plus for a lot of players. And this isn't to say the new career is perfect, far from it. Many people are reporting it's just too easy to level up. That aside, however, I wouldn't say that's specific for this pack. And in fact, I do think they put a lot of care into this career. First of all, there's a variety of tasks, including both office-based tasks and of course on the ground, so to speak. And also there's a nice dose of humor too. I think overall it's in a creative career. It's also from a vote way back. And I think that this is just a unique addition to the Sims franchise. We also of course do get rabbit hole careers as well. So I think overall this adds to a more well-rounded expansion pack than some previous ones. And that is going to be pretty much the theme for this entire video. Because I would say we also get larger systems that add more meaning to your Sims lives. Now, some expansion packs seem a lot more niche in what they're adding, and I personally am always looking for something more expansive. What I mean is something that impacts your Sim in a deeper way, no matter what world you are playing in. It also does include quite a bit of pack integration, at least for the larger systems. I would say many expansion packs bring new features, but they just don't feel very expansive, especially a pack like Horse Ranch. Now, I'm not saying Horse Ranch is a bad pack, but I think it's an example of an expansion pack that doesn't really feel, at least to me, like a true expansion pack. And of course, with this new expansion pack, we get the Soul's Journey and also the Bucket List. Now, these do include a mix of both easier and more difficult goals, including ideas though from other packs. And to that note, it can even encourage you to engage with past packs or content you may have forgotten about, which I do think is clever. Now, admittedly, I always hope for more dimension and nuance, and that's not always even specific to a pack in particular. And again, many players feel that the Soul's Journey is just kind of easy to complete. It's supposed to be a journey that should last you a lifetime, but it can be kind of easy for many people to complete these goals. Goals also are kind of uneven in terms of the type of goals you get, and while I do think that makes sense, they are equal in value, so to speak. However, the larger key here is it is a larger system, it guides you to do new things, and it also adds more to your Sims story. I do think that the Soul's Journey, along with the Bucket List, is a new way to play. And of course, we do have aspirations, but I always feel like aspirations really lean heavily towards trying to basically show you the pack, while this makes you explore your Sims character more. Again, it's not a perfect system, but it is another sign of why this does feel more like an expansion pack than some other packs. And while I always have some beef with how Sims 4 traits operate, I will say that getting new traits is always welcome, and these traits do feel unique. What I also like about these traits is they aren't just positive attributes. I feel like so often in Sims 4 we get positive attributes, and it just isn't honestly that interesting to me. We get Chased by Death, which is adding kind of a challenge. Now, I do know there's been some debate and discourse that say, hey, this shouldn't even be a trait, it could be a challenge in of itself. And I do understand that critique, but I still think it's a decent addition. We also, of course, get the Macabre trait, and again, kind of a hint at a darker note. And while we can always argue that traits could have more impact and cause more conflict and consequences, I will still say, again, we're talking in terms of other Sims 4 packs and why this could have been a little bit more successful than some other ones. Now, of course, on the other hand, this isn't really everyone's cup of tea whatsoever. Some people really do like a more optimistic view of life, and some people just don't like the topic of this expansion pack at all, which is why I find this so interesting. I would say Lovestruck, I would have guessed, would have been a more universally interested theme, but it does seem like this pack is succeeding regardless. And I will say, much should also be said about the new world. Now, honestly, there's been lots of discourse about the new world, but it does offer new collectibles, and thus has a reason for you to actually want to explore it. Of course, there's still set dressing, but we're comparing this to other packs that might not have sold, so even with that set set dressing. So even though indeed there is set dressing, there are tarot cards in particular that you collect, which does take you kind of on a journey, adds a little bit of lore to uncover some secrets. There's ghost townies, so to speak. There's just little things to unpack here and there. Now, there are elements of this world that many people wish were more interactive. There's one pond in particular you cannot swim in. But in general, again, it just adds something to this pack. You also, of course, have the festivals. And yes, festivals are way overused in Sims 4, I will say that. But I will say they do try to add some unique details so that festivals feel unique for this pack. Adding to the sense that Life and Death expansion pack is a little bit more well-rounded, we also get a supernatural component. And of course, ghosts are getting their own skill tree, and I do think this adds to your overall value. You might not have paid attention to ghosts much before, but this gives you new powers to impact Sims negatively and positively. Now, honestly, so many features in this pack you could argue had more potential. You could say they could take some of these features a little bit further, but of course, ghosts also tie into the whole system of rebirth, and that has its own nuance and details too. Of course, we also have grief and funerals and mourning and wills, and I think the key here is small details. These small details make them a little bit more interesting. For example, passing down heirlooms to other Sims. I think this is good for legacy and storytelling and challenge. And even though some people feel like this pack is very supernatural in nature, in reality it has both supernatural and family and legacy components. Could even be a good pack for rags to riches. In other words, they are hitting a number of playstyles. However, a lot of times when they try to appease many people at once, it can feel a little bit confusing, but I would argue this pack overall has a more cohesive feel. So in terms of gameplay, I would argue this expansion pack does feel a little bit more rounded and brings you a little bit more for your money than some other expansion packs. There's also a lot of replayability where it's not just that you do one thing once and then you're pretty much done with it. Of course, sometimes these packs that do have higher replayability, I would argue to some people seem less exciting. One example I would give is Growing Together, and I still will defend that pack. I feel like Growing Together is definitely an imperfect pack, but it's one of those examples of a pack that naturally integrates into your gameplay and expands the game overall. Of course, we could also talk about Cast and Build By. With Build By in particular, we get a new kitchen set, we also get a new bathroom, living room items, and of course all other components to create a full build. And I feel like a lot of times we get packs where we get Build By items and it's hard to actually create a whole house out of it. Overall, I really do think it feels well balanced, even though it does have some classic Sims 4 flaws. Now finally, there's also this interview from the Sims team which kind of gets to the heart of the inspiration behind this expansion pack. We wanted to make the best in class world, not just the size and number of lots, but also things to do. Lots of activity, fun festivals, interesting NPCs, and points of interest to interact with. The first two neighborhoods are a little bit more realistic. One is countryside, the other is a village. Then the third one is the afterlife. It's really scary with the vines and sounds and the bog. They also mentioned they were actually inspired by previous Sims games, and to say they were inspired by previous Sims games, I actually can see it. Yes, don't get me wrong, it is still a Sims 4 game, but I think sometimes they can take some positive inspiration and turn it into something unique for this game. Overall, I feel like this is the stronger expansion pack we've had for a while. Now in the coming days, hopefully I will be looking for the top concerns, bugs, glitches, you name it with this expansion pack, but I just kind of wanted to give my 2 cents of why I think this expansion pack feels a little bit more nuanced than some past recent packs. Of course, in terms of overall sales, even if I had the exact numbers of how well this was selling, it would be pretty tricky to compare, especially as the Sims community has grown over the years. But that is a video for another day. Also, I think it's worth noting how just uneven expansion packs are in terms of overall quality and the type of content you get. I would love to do a video on that, but for now, please take care and I'll see you in the next one.